This is NTD Evening News. Live from our NTD Global Headquarters in New York City, here is Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris confirm a debate set for September 10th. Trump held a press conference today at his Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida.
So I just look forward to these debates. I think it's very important that we have them. I hope she agrees to them September 4th, September 10th, September 25th, and I think they'll be very revealing.
Earlier today, ABC News confirmed that both Trump and Harris have agreed to a debate on September 10th. Harris, when asked by reporters today about Trump's three-debate offer, said she's happy to have that conversation after the first one. Meanwhile, the former president said he's slated to do a sit-down interview with Elon Musk on Monday. The Tesla CEO threw his support behind Trump in the wake of a failed assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. Here's Trump responding to NTD's Iris Tao about the upcoming interview.
I respect Elon a lot. He respects me. And not easy for him to endorse, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be Monday night. And I believe he's the host of the show. So it'll be very interesting. A lot of people are talking about it. I look forward to it. That'll be done on Monday night.
And Harris today saying her team is working on scheduling a sit-down interview before the end of the month. And with that in mind, NTD's Jason Blair has an update on the Democrats' campaign.
Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz were campaigning in Wisconsin and Michigan on Wednesday, with Harris showing confidence in her VP pick.
He has been a serious leader and he loves our country.
Former President Trump told Fox and Friends Wednesday that he's thrilled about Harris choosing Walz and also surprised.
I can't believe it. I never thought this was going to be the one that was picked.
Harris spoke at a second campaign event in Detroit on Thursday, then is flying to Arizona with a rally scheduled in Phoenix on Friday. The Harris-Walz team seems to be getting off to a strong start. The campaign announced $36 million raised in the first 24 hours following the Walz VP announcement.
When you're raised by an immigrant mother.
And on Thursday, the campaign announced a new ad targeting Latino voters. It's called Determination and, quote, spotlights Vice President Harris's story, a story that mirrors that of many Latinos and immigrants. The campaign said that Harris was raised by an immigrant mother. The Harris team said it will run in both English and Spanish on TV, radio, and media platforms in battleground states. Reporting on Capitol Hill, Jason Blair, NTD News.
An update on the assassination attempt on former President Trump. Fox News just obtained police body cam footage from just before the shooting at the Trump rally on July 13th. The news agency obtained the footage from the Butler Township Police Department through a records request. It shows two officers attempting to stop the shooter, Thomas Matthew Crooks, who was on the roof moments before the shooting. In the footage, one officer said he scaled the building but saw Crooks pointing his gun at him, forcing the officer to duck. He later fell from the 8-foot-tall building after losing his grip on the roof's edge. The police body cam is the latest publicly available footage of the assassination attempt. We continue to follow the conflicts in the Middle East. Israeli forces are ordering another mass evacuation in southern Gaza. This comes as the State Department says it's in the final stages of negotiating a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas.
But we do want to get these talks across the finish line. It is important that the talks be able to take place, that they take place sometimes virtually, and that they take place in person as well. And we're going to continue to push for those to happen to finalize this agreement. As you've heard the president say, as you've heard the secretary say, we really do think we are in the final stages. We have agreement on a framework. There's some final pieces left to agree on to implementation. That takes both Israel and Hamas agreeing. So yes, we want to see talks continue, and that does mean that there has to be someone on the other end of those negotiations.
The State Department is also warning against any escalation of the conflict by either side or a third party. Inside the Gaza Strip, thousands of Palestinians in eastern Khan Yunis are beginning to evacuate to other areas. The Israel Defense Forces said they plan to launch operations there in response to Hamas rocket fire. Khan Yunis is Gaza's second largest city, and Israel's evacuation order covers large areas in and around the city. Regional tensions have soared as Iran is expected to retaliate against Israel for the killing of Hamas's political leader. French President Emmanuel Macron and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni are the latest world leaders urging Iran to de-escalate. Under the Biden administration, the Israel-Hamas war has sparked much debate and protests over how the United States should position itself. NTD's Arlene Richards reviews how presidential candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are positioning themselves on the war in their fight for the most votes.
Israel-Hamas war. It started on October 7, 2023, when Hamas terrorists attacked civilians at a Jewish holiday festival, killing about 1,200 people and capturing hundreds more. Although more than 100 people were released, several have died in captivity, and the status of others is unknown. Since launching her campaign last month, Kamala Harris hasn't mentioned the war. But as vice president, she has largely stood behind President Biden's policies.
I come to Israel with a single message. You're not alone. You are not alone. As long as the United States stands, and we will stand forever, we'll not let you ever be alone. As the American president, there's no higher priority than the release and safe return of all these hostages.
Biden so far has failed to secure a complete ceasefire and release of the remaining hostages, as well as a two-state solution. Former President Trump says that the war never would have started if he was still president, and has called the Biden administration soft. But he's been largely silent about a Palestinian state. A month into the war, Biden saw the death toll rising among Palestinian civilians at the hands of Israel's counterattack. He supported a 4-day pause in fighting to ensure a hostage deal and to provide humanitarian aid. Progressive lawmakers called for an end to the war in Gaza, saying the temporary pause was not enough. Shortly after approving delivery of thousands of tank shells to Israel, Biden began to change. He said Israel was starting to lose support around the world and called its response in Gaza over the top. And he began pushing harder for the ceasefire. In March, seeing no change, Harris, as vice president, appeared to make a break from Biden. In an Alabama speech, she spoke forcefully about a ceasefire, signaling more support for the Palestinian people.
What we are seeing every day in Gaza is devastating. As I have said many times, too many innocent Palestinians have been killed.
And just days into her presidential campaign, Harris skipped Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to Congress in protest of the war. During a private meeting with Netanyahu, Harris told him to get the ceasefire done.
I also expressed with the Prime Minister my serious concern about the scale of human suffering in Gaza, including the death of far too many innocent civilians.
Her new vice presidential pick, Tim Walz, told PBS Harris has an opportunity to break from Biden on this war issue.
Look, I think she's got an opportunity to show the leadership that we know is there. Look, those folks express their opinion, and I'm proud to be part of a party that doesn't all wear the same red hats and bow down a knee to one guy.
During Trump's presidency, his administration showed full support for Israel.
The administration is reversing the Obama administration's approach towards Israeli settlements. The establishment of Israeli civilian settlements in the West Bank is not, per se, inconsistent with international law.
The administration moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to the disputed capital of Jerusalem, and Trump endorsed Israeli control of the Golan Heights, a contested fertile plateau Israel captured from Syria in 1967. Trump has condemned Hamas and supports Israel's right to defend itself, but he agrees with Harris that the war should end.
They should get the job over with fast. They'll have to make their own solution.
He has said that the war has been going on for too long, but he believes they have to finish what they started in order to solve the problem. In a recent meeting with Netanyahu, Trump urged him to end the war. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The Chinese Communist Party appears to be ramping up its campaign to suppress the Falun Gong spiritual practice here in the United States, this time through social media influencers. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more from the State Department.
Newly leaked documents reveal that the Chinese Communist Party is stepping up its persecution campaign against the Falun Gong spiritual practice and Shenyun, a New York-based performing arts company which shows what China was like before communism. The Chinese officials are doing this by directing social media influencers to attack Falun Gong here in the U.S. and thereby turning the general public against them. It's the latest effort by the Chinese Communist Party to eliminate the Falun Gong spiritual practice. Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, is an ancient practice introduced to the public in the early 1990s. It combines meditation and gentle exercises with moral teachings based on truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. But due to its rising popularity, the Chinese Communist Party launched a persecution of the practice in 1999. Members of the practice are imprisoned in China and subjected to torture, brainwashing, and even forced live organ harvesting. And now, the CCP appears to be expanding its propaganda and disinformation. An August 7th report by the Falun Dafa Information Center found that the Chinese regime is initiating a campaign to eliminate Falun Gong and Shenyun Performing Arts, a New York-based classical Chinese dance group, many of whose performers practice Falun Gong. The report highlights leaked documents inside of China that finds that Chinese officials directed social media influencers and Western media outlets to spread misinformation to trigger a U.S. law enforcement response against Falun Gong practitioners. 3 whistleblowers leaked notes from a June meeting in China's Ministry of Public Security, finding that the Chinese officials ordered its agents to, quote, create and escalate the internal conflicts of Falun Gong to expand non-stop the fighting strength, depth, and reach of social media influencers targeting Falun Gong. They must attract the continuous attention of the entire United States society and force the U.S. government to strike on all fronts, eliminating the force of Falun Gong. We've reached out to the State Department for a response on this, but haven't yet heard back. Now, in the latest action to take action against the persecution of Falun Gong, in the Senate, U.S. officials have introduced the Falun Gong Protection Act, which would sanction any individual involved in the Chinese regime's forced organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. A similar companion version of the bill passed the House back in June. Reporting from the Department of State, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Turning now to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Over the past 3 days, Russian troops have been pushing back an incursion of Ukrainian forces at the border region of Kursk. This marks one of the largest counterattacks from Kyiv since the beginning of the war. Russian officials said roughly 1,000 Ukrainian troops stormed through the border in the early hours of Tuesday. Soldiers from the war-torn nation brought tanks and armored vehicles, along with rounds of drones and artillery. The Kremlin said Ukrainian forces have been stopped from pushing deeper into Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has not commented on the operation, but in a video addressed to the nation, he said, quote, Russia brought the war to our land and it should feel what it has done. Meanwhile, the White House said the U.S. had no prior knowledge of the incursion, but officials would seek more information from Ukraine. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A magnitude 7.1 earthquake hit southwestern Japan earlier today. The country's meteorological agency is warning that the danger isn't over yet.
There is a relatively higher chance of another major earthquake compared to normal times, but we are not advising that there will definitely be a major earthquake in a certain period of time. Please respond to advisories by the government and local offices for disaster prevention.
The earthquake was centered in the ocean off the coast of southern Japan at around 4:40 p.m. local time. The earthquake triggered tsunami advisories, but they have since been lifted. 9 people suffered injuries, most of which were minor. Authorities are investigating the damage and potential casualties. So far, there are no immediate signs of major damage. The Japanese government also reported no abnormalities at nuclear power plants following the quake. Authorities continue to urge residents in the affected region to stay away from the coastline. Here in the U.S., tropical storm Debby has intensified following its second landfall. Debby saturated the already drenched Carolinas and parts of Virginia. The storm spawned a deadly tornado, with the Northeast now preparing for Debby's arrival. NTD's Christina Corona brings us an update on the storm.
Debby made its second U.S. landfall around 2 a.m. near Bulls Bay, South Carolina, just northeast of Charleston. The storm triggered tornadoes that killed one person, raising the total death toll to 7. At least 3 tornadoes were reported overnight in North Carolina, including one around 3 a.m. that damaged at least 4 houses, a church, and a school in Wilson County.
And it didn't last long, but when we heard it. And when we came out, we found out that it had damaged the school. But it was so dark because all the yard lights were out. You really couldn't tell how badly it was damaged until the sun came up this morning. And it's just, it's a mess.
Within hours, over half a foot of rain fell in central North Carolina, causing life-threatening flash flooding and turning roads into rivers with maximum sustained winds at 50 miles per hour. In Charleston and Bluffton, alligators were spotted in residents' flooded backyards. While up to a foot of rain drenched the coastline between Charleston and Savannah, Georgia, residents even saw fish swimming outside their homes.
And I looked down and there's guppies and fish swimming through the water. I'm assuming it came from either that lagoon, either this lagoon, or that canal down there.
Over 100,000 customers are without power. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper outlined the state's preparations for the severe weather.
I've activated more than 350 soldiers and airmen from the North Carolina National Guard and deployed swift water rescue teams to be on the ready.
As Debby continued to impact South Carolina, Governor Henry McMaster provided an update on the state's response on Thursday.
I want to emphasize again that even though it's not raining, the wind's not blowing, there's still a lot of danger from this moving water.
He also warned children not to play in the water and to stay off the watery roads.
Because there's no telling what's in it from all the overflows. There's a lot of danger there. And again, don't drive on roads, don't drive on water in roads, because there's a lot of danger there as well.
Debby is beginning to move northward and is expected to carve a path through Pennsylvania, New York, and northern New England over the next 48 hours. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Today marks 1 year since wildfires began devastating the Hawaiian island of Maui. It's the deadliest such disaster in modern U.S. history, killing more than 100 people. Hawaii Governor Josh Green says to honor them, he ordered flags to fly at half-staff. Officials say the flames left more than 3,000 families homeless. A year later, many still don't have permanent housing. The historic community of Lahaina remains devastated after it was largely wiped out.
We found a house that we can move to. And it feels like home.
After 9 months of living in a hotel room with her daughter and cat, Leola Vieira found a rental home. Vieira lost her home and 2 businesses when a wildfire engulfed the historic town of Lahaina last year, becoming the deadliest U.S. wildfire in a century. The fire killed at least 102 people and left swaths of the town in charred ruins. For a few weeks, Vieira and her husband Mike bounced around hotels. Then Vieira's husband of 57 years died of cancer.
There are a lot because I have been so depressed ever since my husband passed, and I can feel my mind and my memory all going downhill. So I think with this new home, I think I will be able to accept more things now, because it seems like I'm on the right track.
Thousands of displaced residents on Maui have faced a year of anxious uncertainty since the wildfire devastated Lahaina.
And when you start to see mass exodus of the people, you start to change the fabric of Hawaii. And that's what's at stake, is the future of who Hawaii is as an identity, as a people, as a place.
Temporary solutions such as hotel rooms and prefabricated homes have been offered to survivors of the devastating Hawaii fire. However, a housing market squeezed by vacation rentals is hindering long-term shelter efforts. At least 1,500 households have left for other areas due to the shortage of affordable housing, endangering Hawaii's cultural identity. Josephine Frazier worried her young family's next home would be a tent. She, her partner, their 2 sons, and their dog have moved 9 times in as many months from one hotel room to another since the wildfire.
There were times where we had a 24-hour notice that we had to get out of the hotel.
Now, the Red Cross was warning that the hotel shelter program would soon end,
and Fraser was having trouble explaining to her 3-year-old why they couldn't just go home. The Council for Native American Advancement is constructing modular homes in Lahaina and Kauai to provide shelter for those displaced by the fire. Families like Fraser's have benefited from these units, avoiding living in tents.
It's awesome to have a roof, somewhere to call home, at least for now, until we go back into Lahaina.
The council is also providing financial assistance to those taking in loved ones. FEMA has increased rental rates to address housing shortages, while efforts are underway to construct more homes for those in need. Measures to limit vacation rentals and provide long-term solutions are being considered to address the housing crisis on Maui. Back in Lahaina, Vera props up a picture of her late husband on the wall at the rental home. As he died of cancer, he worried about where his wife and daughter would live. That's pushing Vera to the next step.
And we will return to our property that was burnt, and we will rebuild.
And if you're in the market for a new home, now could be a good time to take the plunge. That's because mortgage rates plummeted this week to the lowest level in more than a year. It's a big step in the right direction for America's notoriously unaffordable housing market. According to Freddie Mac, the standard 30-year fixed-rate mortgage averaged 6.47% this week. That's down substantially from last week's average of 6.73%. This marks the lowest level since May 2023. Mortgage rates have steadily fallen over the past several weeks since they reached a 2024 peak of 7.22% in early May. They are also down from a 2-decade high seen late last year. Though some prices remain high, a Freddie Mac economist said the drop in mortgage rates increases prospective buyers' purchasing power. The drop also gives existing homeowners the chance to refinance. Boeing's new CEO, Kelly Ortberg, is already making changes on his first week. Can he save the American manufacturing icon from its current crisis?
Boeing is in crisis. Its losses have tripled. 2 planes and a door have fallen from the sky. $8 billion burned in 6 months. Its reputation as an American manufacturing icon in shambles. Boeing has placed turnaround hopes in new CEO Kelly Ortberg, former head of aerospace manufacturer Rockwell Collins.
Kelly is an excellent fit with their needs. Boeing's #1 challenge is to change its culture and change its value system. Kelly's value system is very much aligned with the needed change.
Aerospace consultant Kevin Michaels has known Ortberg for 25 years, working alongside him at Rockwell Collins. He says Boeing has been focused on investors for the past 25 years, everything else being a distant second. Michaels says Ortberg focuses on the product.
He believes that it is important to first please the customer with a safe and innovative product, to take great care of the employees, to do well in customer satisfaction surveys.
Ortberg grew up in Iowa, where he studied mechanical engineering at the University of Iowa. He says he liked the TV show The Wonder Years, about a teenager growing up in suburban middle-class America in the 1960s. Ortberg says the show taught him you need to work hard to earn your keep, and reminded him of his own childhood. Ortberg's career began as an engineer at Texas Instruments in 1983. He joined Rockwell Collins in 1987, climbing the ranks to become CEO in 2013. Rockwell Collins makes airplane electrical systems. At the firm, he developed a reputation of walking factory floors and getting to know employees.
He is very collaborative. He does not carry a huge ego. He likes to be in the trenches. The fact that he is moving to Seattle and today, in fact, is on the shop floor is indicative of a different style.
Michaels says Ortberg's method is to get the facts, work closely with stakeholders, hear all sides, and act decisively. He expects Ortberg to be walking the factory floor very often.
2 astronauts have been stuck in space for over 60 days. NASA now says they could be there until next year. NASA officials say they could return from the International Space Station on a SpaceX craft in February 2025.
Veteran astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore took off from Earth aboard Boeing Starliner 63 days ago. They were supposed to make a quick stop at the International Space Station and come back 7 weeks ago. But now there seems to be no clear date in sight for their return. From what NASA is saying, it's looking less and less likely the two astronauts will be able to return on the Starliner. In a news conference Wednesday, NASA leaders said they are seriously considering working with Boeing's biggest rival in the spaceflight industry, SpaceX. But this could mean Williams and Wilmore will be trapped on the space station for another 6 months. The Starliner, launched in June, is a high-stakes test mission required before NASA can certify the spacecraft for routine astronaut flights. But a host of problems plagued the mission from the start. Testing still continues to find the root cause of these issues. Until now, NASA officials have said repeatedly they were confident they could bring the astronauts home on the Starliner. On Wednesday, they said they had until mid-August to make their final decision. If NASA decides to go with SpaceX, they could launch the planned Crew 9 mission with 2 astronauts instead of 4. This would mean Williams and Wilmore will return with them, but it will also mean they will have to wait till the mission is completed in February 2025. NASA and SpaceX said they are targeting a September 24th launch for this mission. This would be a big setback for Boeing in the commercial space race. The company hopes to compete with SpaceX to ferry supplies and crew members to and from the space station. Boeing and SpaceX have not yet commented since NASA's latest update.
Joining me now to discuss the upcoming debate between Trump and Harris are 2 guests. Retired Lieutenant Stephen Rogers is a former Trump campaign advisor and a former gubernatorial candidate in New Jersey. And Theron Bond is a Democratic strategist. Thank you both so much for joining us. Great to see you both again. To begin, ABC says both Trump and Harris have agreed to the September 10th presidential debate on that network. Now, Lieutenant, starting with you, what do you see as the strategy Trump will employ?
The strategy he will have to employ in order to win this race is to go after policy. I mean, his policies while we're in office made America truly great again. Economy was strong, the military was strong. We didn't have the border crisis that we have today. So if he could just stay focused on policy, it's his to win.
And Theron, what do you see as the strategy Harris will take?
I think the strategy that Vice President Harris is going to take is just to attack all of the things that former President Donald Trump says he's about, but doesn't really have a substantive anything to show for it. I think she's not going to take the high road. I think she's going to just keep jabbing him, and hopefully that will be enough. I don't think it's going to be, but I think that's the approach that she's going to take.
And on that note, Lieutenant, how do you see the dynamic being different from the Trump-Biden debate?
Well, look, to begin with, your guest just stated that she's going to go after what Trump says and there's no substance. Well, I think the Abraham Accords was substance. I believe that opening up our embassy in Jerusalem was substance. I believe the strong economy was substance. So my point is that every step of the way, no matter what Kamala Harris has to say with regard to criticizing Donald Trump, if she goes after his policy, that's the worst thing she could do. Game over. The American people know that, they feel that, and they understand that right now.
Speaking of policy, Theron, when it comes to policy, Trump's platform is called Agenda 47. It has 20 goals that link to the 16-page platform that was officially adopted by the Republican Party at the RNC. Now, Harris's page right now doesn't include a platform or any policy initiatives. When do you think we'll get more details about the Harris-Walz platform? Is it during the DNC, or what do you think?
I think what we know and don't know about former President Donald Trump's platform is that a lot of it for the 2024 cycle is deriving from Project 2025 and all 900 pages of it. And now it's being cloaked as Agenda 47 in a shorter amount of pages, but they are still intertwined with one another, regardless of what Republicans want to say or attempt to pull the wool over everyone else's eyes. I think if Trump's policies were that great, then we would have seen him be reelected in 2020. But the American people said otherwise. I do think that is to the deficit of Vice President Harris not knowing exactly where she stands on issues. And so the debate will provide a platform for her to truly share those with the American people. That is something that we need to know.
And Lieutenant, what do you see this election coming down to? Personality, policy, something else?
It comes down to the pocketbook. It comes down to the economy. Indeed, we need a strong foreign policy. You see what's going on in the Mideast as a result of the Biden-Harris surrender to ISIS and to other terrorist organizations. But at the end of the day, mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, they go to the supermarket, and right now they can't even afford to feed their families, let alone what may come with Harris in office. So it's going to be boiling down to the economy.
And Theron, when it comes to this debate on September 10th, how do you see the dynamic being different from what we saw with Trump and Biden?
I think then former President Donald Trump kind of knew what he was working with. I think with Vice President Harris, he doesn't really know what to expect. I think if he just goes with what he's heard in the blogs or what he says off the cuff, that's not going to really work for him. What worked for former President Donald Trump in the debate, that he was maintained and he was poised. But we have seen on the campaign trail since then that he hasn't gotten back to that. And so if this is about poise and stature and electability and presentation and what doesn't seem divisive, then Vice President Kamala Harris will win the debate. If it's about stoking fear and what he thinks the American people want to hear, but may not be what actually is a kitchen table issue that impacts millions of Americans, then former President Donald Trump will win. But it is a matter of personalities. It's also a matter of policy and who will best speak to the American people at this current time, not from 4 years ago and not from even 8 years ago.
Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, Theron Bond, thank you both so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
As we near the end of the primary season, nearly all congressional members who voted to impeach former President Trump are gone from next year's Congress after retiring or being ousted in primaries. And a new Montana poll highlights a potential Senate seat flip. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more on these important races to watch in November.
Congressman Dan Newhouse of Washington is the second to last House Republican to remain in office since he joined 10 other Republicans in voting to impeach former President Trump back in 2021. The others either retired or were defeated in a primary race. Now it's looking increasingly likely that Newhouse may be defeated in this year's election by a Trump-endorsed candidate, Jared Sessler. He's a former NASCAR driver and U.S. Navy veteran.
It's like this big dome and it's kind of a protected environment.
Right.
That's like what God has done in America, and it's not natural. If we don't maintenance it, it's going to go away.
Sessler beat Newhouse by nearly 7 percentage points. But they'll face off again in November because of Washington's nonpartisan blanket primary system. The top 2 candidates advance to the general election. Another race we're keeping an eye on is one of Montana's Senate seats. There's a matchup between Republican veteran Tim Sheehy and third-term Democrat Senator Jon Tester.
I want to remind Washington what it is to have service and sacrifice at the center of your mission.
This election is really important. If you want a Montana that's the Montana you were raised in, this election is really important.
Tester wasn't on the ticket in 2020 when Trump won Montana. Now that his seat's up for grabs, he's trying to rally Republicans to his side. Just this week, his campaign launched a Republicans for Tester group to brace for the tight race. As for the top of the ticket, Trump leads Harris in the state of Montana 55% to 40% according to a new poll. As for undecided voters, when they were asked who they'd lean towards, Trump jumps up to 58%. Kamala Harris ticks up, though still trailing Trump at 43%. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on today, especially in the Olympics. Let's start right there. As the men's Team USA basketball squad was in serious trouble against Serbia, yet somehow escaped with a win. How'd they do it?
An incredible fourth quarter comeback. You know, they looked like a different team really that final 10 minutes, outscored them by 17 points. Serbia got off to a really hot start. Actually, so did Steph Curry. But by the end of the first quarter, Serbia had like an 8-point lead, and then he blinked. All of a sudden, they were up 17 early in the second quarter. They really controlled the game for a long time after that. All through the third quarter, they really held the U.S. at arm's length. But to start the fourth, Team USA had a much different energy, especially on defense. They were really a step quicker. All of a sudden, Serbia could not quite get into their half-court sets as well. That led to turnovers and missed shots. So the U.S. finally caught them and took the lead with about 3 minutes left. Now, they didn't seal it, though, until Steph Curry hit a couple free throws with 8 seconds remaining to put them up 4. Serbia then missed, and then Team USA got the rebound. That was it. So this was quite a comeback for Team USA. They really had not been tested at all these Olympics. Now they advance to the gold medal game against France, and that'll be on Saturday.
Now, elsewhere at these games, there was a much anticipated women's 400-meter hurdles event that actually turned anticlimactic as Sydney Mclaughlin-Levrone won in record time. Who was expected to challenge her?
Well, Femke Bol of the Netherlands was expected to be her main competition. Bol somehow finished third behind both Mclaughlin-Levrone and fellow American Anna Cockrell. So this race actually was not very close. Now, Femke Bol made quite a name for herself over the weekend when she came back to shock the U.S. in the mixed 4x400 relay. She was also the world champion in this event. She just did not have her best time today. Now, elsewhere, the U.S. women's volleyball team beat rival Brazil in the semifinals. This is a rematch of the gold medal game 3 years ago between these really two powerhouse teams. And in the men's 110-meter hurdles, American Grant Holloway won gold. So it was really a big day all around for the track and field team for Team USA.
Now, elsewhere in track and field, an unusual scene as American Noah Lyles not only finished third in the 200-meter sprint, but afterwards NBC reported that he tested positive for COVID. What is his status going forward?
Well, he's got one event left. It's in the 4x100-meter relay. He said he's not sure if he's going to participate in that, though. I mean, that would take place tomorrow. Now, Lyles said he woke up Tuesday morning not feeling well. He got tested then. So it really puts a different spin on his performance the last couple of days. I mean, he finished second in the 200-meter semis yesterday. That's the first time he hasn't won this race in like the last 3 years. So there are questions whether he was all right or not. And then he finished third today in the 200-meter finals as Letsile Tebogo of Botswana won gold, while American Kenneth Benerick finished second. So finishing bronze despite having COVID really puts this in perspective.
And looking ahead to the Olympic schedule for tomorrow, what are some major events to watch and where are we in the medal count?
Well, tomorrow, Women's Team USA basketball is going to play for the gold against Australia. Now, they've kind of fallen in the shadow of the men's team a bit, but if they win Friday, this will mark their 60th straight Olympic victory and their 8th straight gold. Now, that game is going to be at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Meanwhile, in track and field, 16-year-old sprinter Quincy Wilson will be part of the U.S.'s 4x400 relay team, making him the youngest American male to participate in a track and field event at the Olympics. He's going to run the open round. That'll be 5:05 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. Meanwhile, the 4x400 relay will be up tomorrow as well. The women's is going to be at 1:30. The men's is going to be at 1:45. Now, both American teams had the fastest runs in the semifinals. The men doing without Noah Lyles today because he was running in the 200-meter event. Now, as far as medal count, very close in the golds. U.S. leads China right now 30-29. Third place, no one is really close in that. Overall medals, the U.S. is well ahead, 103. China's next with 73. France is third with 54.
Well, Davis Owens, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
American figure skaters who had competed at the Beijing Winter Olympics received reallocated gold medals in Paris yesterday. The athletes expressed relief after a long legal and emotional roller coaster that began in the run-up to the 2022 Games. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the latest.
At the foot of the Eiffel Tower, the American figure skating team finally received the gold they had earned in Beijing. American skater Nathan Chen savored the moment, even though it was long delayed.
Our wish as a team was just to be able to have a celebration together and then also at an Olympics. And so, fortunately, this is the closest Olympics to our Olympics. And it would have been really special, of course, to have in Beijing. The ceremony was amazing there as well. But of course, having it at the base of the Eiffel Tower was not that either.
In 2021, Russian skater Kamila Valieva had tested positive for a banned drug. Her team said the positive test could have been due to a mix-up with her grandfather's heart medication. But the 15-year-old was still allowed to compete at the Winter Games in 2022. The positive test was made public just a day after she helped Russia win gold in the team event in Beijing.
Yeah, I think it was very emotional and overwhelming at the same time, but I think that's the one thing that made this so amazing. In 2022, there was COVID, so we weren't able to have family or an audience, and to have an audience while we got our medals, and of course family and friends too, was pretty incredible.
The International Olympic Committee decided to withhold medals for the team figure skating event until Valieva's case had been resolved. Athletes wondered if they would ever see the medals they won in Beijing.
In terms of the legal case surrounding the doping and the medal allocation for the team event, that's always been there, and everyone's been asking me about it. That certainly hasn't helped me forget it, but I think finally now we can get some closure for this specific medal allocation.
The highest court in sport determined Valieva had violated anti-doping rules in January, stripping Russia of its gold medal in the event. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
The Olympic Cauldron is generating buzz as a potential new monument for Paris. The rising ring of flame in the sky inspires many tourists and visitors to take pictures of it. Crowds gather every night near the Louvre to attend the show. NTD correspondent David Vivez was on location yesterday.
It's become a new ritual in Paris. As night falls, thousands of visitors flock to the Tuileries Garden to admire the Olympic cauldron glide across the Parisian sky. Visitors need to book tickets to admire it. However, since all the spots have been filled, they need to find an alternative location to avoid missing the show. Since 8 p.m., crowds gather in front of the Louvre, preparing smartphones to take pictures and cross fingers in hopes that the weather will be good enough for the flame to rise.
It's so cool. We were hoping to catch it in the air, but apparently that doesn't happen till later.
We went to the end of the zone just before, and then we thought we're going to get the flame. It's nice, it's cheerful, it's beautiful. I think that makes people happy to be here.
At almost 7 meters in diameter, the ring of fire is made up of a cloud of mist and lit by LED beams of light. The cauldron has gained fame for its beautiful scenes when captured next to Parisian monuments, such as the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe and the Louvre statues. City Mayor Anne Hidalgo said she'd like the cauldron to remain a permanent feature in the city. France's sport minister said the president is considering the question. Some Parisians also like the idea of making the cauldron a new monument.
It's like the Eiffel Tower. It's a great idea. The Eiffel Tower was supposed to be removed after the Universal exhibition. It eventually stayed, and it's the flower of Paris. So I think that this could be the same case for the flame.
Until further notice, the cauldron will stay until the end of the Paralympic Games. This gives until September 8th for those who want to take a selfie. David Vivez, NTD News, Paris.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.